welcome back to Black Ibis Social Club. Another beautiful day in South Carolina over here where I'm at. And today on Substack's best podcast, number one primo podcast of intellectual revolutionaries, religious theologians, and auteurs and artists of all sorts, we got Mr. Fisto Sobani and our guest for today, once again, gracing the storied halls of our club, Uncouth Barbarian. What's up, Uncouth?
Hey guys.
Hey man,
Fisto?
welcome. Hello.
All right. So I've been looking forward to having another chat with Uncouth again. Lots of stuff has happened. When were you last time on here? Like, it was like
Oh man.
early
Just
spring.
the other day. Just the other day.
Man, you know what? It feels like the other day, but I looked it up like sometime this week. I was scrolling it, and it was like March or something. It was a while ago. It was maybe February. Like
It feels like forever. This like just with all the political stuff and everything going on, like things are going so fast.
yeah, it's wild. It's like insane. I'm looking through my desk right now for some fire because I'm trying to light some incense in my room.
Some incense.
Yeah, I got some
Pretty fantastic.
some frankincense over here, so it smells like an
Nice.
Orthodox church. Like
Wow.
trying to get that feeling to match my mood today. I'm feeling very
I'm
sacramental.
I decided before the podcast I'd do something really smart and I ate a ton of spaghetti.
Oh,
So I feel
yeah.
like that's gonna be just perfect for
Yeah.
my my energy levels today.
My dog is barking. Give me a second. Let me go see if somebody's
No,
trying
no
to murder
problem.
me. Okay, you guys
All
talk for
right. All
talk for a
right. Good
second.
luck. Good luck.
Oh man. See, you and your spaghetti, I'm down in coffee because I'm dealing with all this spring and summer heat. Man.
Yeah. It's just what I wanted to eat. I was thinking of what I, need to eat something before the podcast. It was just like, yeah,
You-
spaghetti. That
you-
sounds
th-
amazing.
there you go. You're channeling your Italian and Rome. The
I
Rome.
did. Absolutely.
Yep. Yep.
Then I've got my cat Alex here just staring me down. He decided to basically get up my ass for like the last hour.
You
So
named your cat after me?
no, I didn't. I named him after Alex Kamal of The Expanse. But he may actually try to become a guest on the podcast. I don't know if you guys heard, he was yelling at me a minute ago.
Yeah, I mean the
But
dogs are always on the podcast every day.
yeah, exactly. He's a nice little guy. Friend of mine had him when he was a kitten, and he was like, I can't handle another animal. So I was like, I'll take him.
Oh man, no.
So here he is.
You
What's
want my
up, buddy?
dogs? You can have both my dogs if you want.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Perfect.
The 100-pound one and the little evil. Oh, I like that. I like them both. You know what? Here, let me see. Let me think. Okay, I want to phrase this, and this is something I want to say because Uncouth, I think you might be the perfect guest for this opinion
Oh,
because
here we go. Just right
because
off the bat. Boom.
yeah, we're gonna go. We're gonna not waste time, right?
Get the
Uncouth,
dick out. Let's go. Sorry.
Uncouth, you're a guy that talks a lot about like community and actually doing things, right? And I'm gonna have to tell you, man, in the last few days, maybe a week or so, I have just become just irreparably fatigued with the internet. I am at the
Mm.
point where I no longer care about what 90% of people say. And the problem with it, and the problem I'm starting to see is that there's a complete lack of, I guess the word would be participation, right? There's a lot of opinion, but very little participation. And what I mean by that is you get a lot of guys that are commenting on religion, whether it's paganism, Christianity, blah, 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 but none of these guys go to church, like, and in my opinion, and this is kind of like my new policy from now on. I thought about this for the last few days. If you have opinions on religion and you don't go to church, shut the fuck up. Right? And by
Mhm.
church, I mean like whether you're pagan, Jewish, go to temple, Buddhists go to the temple, Shinto go to the shrines, right? If you are non-practicing, as in you are not part of a participant community, please be quiet. I don't care what you have to say. Religion is a lived experience, all right? Being an online religious person has zero value, okay? And the same applies for the other multiple topics, right? If you are ranting about politics and you don't even know who your local representatives are, or even, unless you're ranting in a position of like, I don't believe in voting, I don't believe in democracy, that's respectable. If you don't believe in democracy and all this stuff, cool, shut up about democracy, okay? Right? But if you don't know if you're talking about like making changes and stuff and you don't know who your representatives are, you don't know any of the local ordination, all you're commenting on is the WWF, politics. There's tons of people commenting on like the Romanian election right now, and none of them have any freaking clue what the hell they're talking about because they don't understand Eastern Europe, one iota. They don't understand the people. They don't understand anything about it, right? And it's just ridiculous. And you extrapolate that to everything, and you see it on and on and on. The other one that I really cannot stand is people that comment on families and children who themselves have no families or children. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that you cannot have an educated opinion. It just, I don't care. All right. And I'm not going to engage with you. And here's a way to look at it. You can be intelligent, you can be into something, or you can have knowledge about something from a very intellectual level. But think about it this way. If there are people right now out in the world, right, who study every single battle in the Civil War. These guys know things, right? They can tell you every unit in both the Union and Confederate Army. They can, narrate the battles in their sleep. They can do all, they can tell you every weapon used, every cannon, every maneuver, every horse. They probably know the horses' names, every general, sergeant, all the way down, right? There's people that knew that. I had a friend who's a professor. He's a Harvard history PhD. This guy, for example, he can list almost every single participant in the Battle of Poitiers and Anjou. You know what I mean? Like, this guy could list every knight and their like footmen that's within the record, right? But here's the thing. That historical knowledge, right? The best it could ever do, even if they go and recreate it, one of those like Civil War battlefield recreations or whatever, right? Has zero value compared to the actual lived experience, right?
Yeah.
The opinion of the veteran that lived through those wars, I mean, there's none left anymore, but hypothetically speaking, right, has so much more value, even though it's a limited perspective of one person, than the entirety of the recreationist knowledge, right? So you get these guys and they're talking about how you should raise your family and blah, blah, blah. And they don't have families. They don't have wives. They don't have children. They don't have anything. And, you see the same thing when it comes to religion. You got ortho bros and trad cats and Protestantards and pagans and stuff. And it's like, yeah, dude, it's great. But have you plucked out your own eye and sacrificed to Odin? No? Then shut up about it, dude.
It's because everyone, like, no matter what the subject is, just wants to be like respected. Like, there are so few paths to respect or honor or something like that these days, that people are looking for that, and they don't want to sacrifice. Like, so they're just, instead of going out and working for it, they're just trying to find it any way they can, and they're doing it the most retarded way, which is through knowledge. And I get it, knowledge is easy, like you're saying, but instead of going out and getting the calluses, whether it's spiritual calluses, whatever it is, they're not doing anything. Like, right, whatever it is, working on your car, working to build something, like Fisto going and doing theater, building his community.
Right.
Like, you got to go out and do something. And until you do, whether it's having a child, building a community through theater, building it through church, like you say, I don't care, because you just show that you're not willing to act. You're just a stupid slave. Like, because until you're willing to put skin in the game and do something, you're just going to be someone who does what they're told.
Right. Right.
Yeah. It's it's an inability to do the everyday mundane acts that actually create a life. We want to just be able to DoorDash it and have everything taken care of for us. I don't know if you guys saw it, but I restacked it earlier this week. I would strongly recommend you check out Matt Ellison's latest essay on the prophet Harvard rejected. And it's an essay talking about a speech that Alexander Solzhenitsyn gave at Harvard back in 1978. He was the commencement speaker in 1978. And he basically pulls the old Russian thing and just whips out the gulag cock and beats everyone with it.
World split apart.
Oh, it's fantastic.
I literally have it sitting
Um,
on my desk right here.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
world split apart. Yeah. So like couple bits that Mr. Ellison pulled out of the article. A decline in courage may be the most striking feature which an outside observer notices in the West in our days. The Western world has lost its civil courage, both as a whole and separately, in each country, each government, each political party, and of course in the United Nations. Such decline in courage is particularly noticeable among the ruling groups of the intellectual elite, causing an impression of loss of courage by the entire society. And then later on, what does he have here? Ah, here it is. This is a good one. This is essentially what you're talking about, Alex.
Right.
Hastiness and superficiality are the psychic disease of the 20th century, and more than anywhere else, this disease is reflected in the press. Such as it is, however, the press has become the greatest power within the Western countries, more powerful than the legislative power, the executive, and the judiciary. And one would like to ask, by what law has this been elected and for whom it is responsible? Everybody's talking about all kinds of stuff because everybody wants to be part of the power. They all want to be part of the press. So hastiness and superficiality is our burden, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, it's great. And just last thing I want to say, and then I'll shut up. Solzhenitsyn, he does a good job of pointing out, Ellison does a good job of pointing out how Solzhenitsyn is mourning. And that is something that, I mean, I don't even want to do that. Like that is correct. That is accurate. But the thought of properly really mourning what we've lost is, oh my God. But it's required. It must be done. So I don't know.
Right.
I'll do what must be done. But
Well,
anyway,
I think what's important, and that's excellent, man. Thank you for sharing that. I need to go read that essay.
yeah.
Um,
Oh,
wh-
it's fantastic. The speech itself is really great too. I only got about a halfway through reading it myself, but whew, lad, it's crazy that 1978 basically called all of it, and here we are 50 years later, 60 years later. I'm reading it, going, oh, huh.
right, right.
So anyway,
And I think what's important, and this is like I'm addressing young readers, young listeners on podcasts, and is that you know what's really important is that you get mentorship from older people, right? And that's hard to find because people in the previous generations, like X and boomers, kind of suck. Like it's just they've kind of disconnected. It's not true of all, of course. There's some fantastic mentors and older people out there. And us millennials we're kind of stumbling through it because of a lack of mentorship from our elders, right? But you have to look at people and judge them by the fruit of their labor, basically. If if you're taking family advice from a transgender, some kind of troon with cat ears, that's telling you how to live a spiritual life, well, you probably messed up, man. Okay,
Yeah.
that's probably not the person you should, have comment on your
And,
cultural, spiritual outlook. Okay,
and,
maybe you should
and
listen. Yeah,
oh, I was just going to say the biggest, like, most confusing thing about it for me growing up was discounting like how confident older people would be about it, because the most like train wreck people about it would be the most confident about
right,
their advice too. Like all you young people, even if they're saying, well, don't make the mistakes I would make, do this instead, they have they haven't necessarily learned from their mistakes. Like just because they've made mistakes and saying don't make my mistakes, do this instead, doesn't mean that the do this instead is the right advice, because if they haven't actually achieved success, that advice isn't worth shit.
Right, right. It's like, listen, dude, you live in a one bedroom apartment made out of chewed up newspaper paper mache, okay? Like, and you eat out of a tin can. Like, maybe you're not the best person to follow, okay? And it's, you know, look, none of it matters unless you have participation, okay? And this is something that I learned in the last few years directly by becoming much more involved in a church. I you know I'm a I tended to be the intellectual Christian stereotype, right? Which is the guy that reads every single book and knows everything about the topic, right? I can sit here and I can tell you about, you know, different theological debates over, from like over 1,000 years ago, and I can sit there and have a conversation, right? But I never went to church. I never prayed. I never did any of that stuff. I didn't live, and it doesn't matter if you have a shelf of books on any topic and you know everything about the topic. If you don't go live it, it's ultimately just a hobby that you're into, right? I don't know, Uncouth, if you ever got into like tabletop role playing games.
I did like at a certain point in my life. Yeah.
Well, you probably met, me too. I haven't played it, and sadly, I haven't played a tabletop game in like a role playing game in like over a decade or more, actually. But when I was younger, I used to like be into Dungeons and Dragons and some other role playing games like Shadowrun, and you always meet these guys that were like, "Oh, I love role playing games," and they have every book imaginable. They're this is probably the same in like any hobby really, like probably like Warhammer 40K. You'd have every figurine and every rule book and every story, and these guys will have everything, but they don't actually go and play, you know? And it's like if you just get the books and the rule books and the stuff to play, but you don't participate in the actual social element of it, the actual game of it, sitting around a table with people, with humans, really doing it, then you know nothing. You
Mhm.
know, you're basically just reading about something. You're not taking part of it, right? And a lot of times, like, we take the opinions of people online and they're anonymous. And being anonymous is not wrong whatsoever. I'm talking to two anonymous people right now. Um, but you gotta, like, if you're gonna follow somebody's advice, you kind of gotta like know that they have something worthwhile to follow. You can follow intelligent advice, but if the person is like, oh yeah, I'm a 20-year-old kid, and I'm married, let me give you like marriage advice, maybe you should shut up about it, dude. Maybe you're not the right person to, like if I ever wanted to like learn how to like dab or something, or change the batteries in my vape, I'll go to you, right? But I'm going to pass on how to raise a child from a child. Um, and we just see so much of that online because ultimately online is a simulacra of the town square, but it's not the town square. And we need to remember that, okay? We need to remember that the people that post on X are doing it because they're making money off of you clicking on their websites. I have to say that I think, unfortunately, that for all the freedom Elon Musk brought to Twitter, he completely ruined it because it's overrun by just clout chasers and people making money off of it, and like, weird Indian dudes posting dumbass pictures all day for, from to make money off of it. And it's kind of ruined, and any real conversation is ruined on that. So now you've got a bunch of like stupid takes, and that's coming to Substack, unfortunately, where let me post my stupid take that's like offensive and it's going to piss people off just for engagement. And it's tiresome, man. I'm so tired of it. I don't want to engage with it. I don't want to talk. I don't want to think about it. I want community, man. I want to talk about, hey, I want Uncouth, give me advice on how to raise a kid, because you have kids, right? Fisto, give me advice how to talk to teenagers, because I work with or I might work with some teenagers in the future, and I'll be able
Yeah.
to like teach them, right? Like, teach me how to teach kids how to get into books. Teach them how to teach people how to get into, you know what I mean, right? That's what I want, and I really want to like prune my Substack life and online life and only get value out of it. I'm tired of endless stupidity about stuff that is just non-important to my life. You know, and that's how I've been feeling lately. That's kind of why I've been kind of not online for the last few days.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've been avoiding it too, to a certain degree, um, just because I'm busy and I'm tired. And you see just what you're talking about. It's it's interesting to read. Ted Gloria had an article today that I saw where apparently the a Chicago newspaper, a big one, I forget the name, which one, but they posted an article. They published an article about a book list for 2025 for your summer 2025 reading, and all of the books they recommended don't exist because an AI wrote it and hallucinated all of these books by authors. So just straight up made it up, published it, off we go. All of it's, fake. And it's just funny. It's like, man, it's a gaggle of morons babbling at each other.
Yeah.
That's all the internet is.
I,
That's all the
I
internet
mean,
is.
I think that ultimately it'll come down to Substack will be only worthwhile for reading the articles and commenting in the articles.
Which is incidentally what was most worthwhile back when it first started.
Yep.
To come full circle, trap all the idiots in notes, and the rest of us can just come around to
Yeah. Yeah.
avoiding notes for the most part. So yeah, that's probably that's the long game. Well played, best.
Right. I mean, ultimately, one of the kind of the beefs about Substack is that they're tossing all these new, like, oh, let's do videos, let's do TikToks on it and stuff, and I don't care, I don't care whatsoever about any of that stuff. If I wanted TikTok videos and everything, I would, go to TikTok, which I don't have, I'm not interested in, I don't want to. But they added a podcast feature, which is great because it is ultimately a long form, intellectual format. But there's no support for it. You know what I mean? Like there's no like podcast tab or like podcast searching on here. We're basically out in like the majority of our podcasts like clicks come through Spotify, YouTube, and other places, right? So it's kind of like cool, bro. Thanks for the support on that, like, and ultimately we're a Substack podcast and we've organically built everything on Substack. We do like no advertising, and we get thousands of downloads on each episode. And so I don't know, I wish they did a little bit more focus on, promoting the organic writers on here instead of, trying to please the newcomers from refugees from whatever New York Times, like they get fired for whatever current. I mean, is there anybody left in the New York Times that's worth reading, or is
I'm sure there isn't. I'm not even gonna think about it.
yeah,
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, who knows? Is there any stuff that you guys have seen recently that you like? I mean that Matt Allison article is gonna need to be, I'm gonna need to continue spreading that far and wide. And if I recall correctly, I saw it thanks to NS Lyons, who is another great writer on Substack. If anybody out there isn't reading that guy, you need to drop what you're doing, pause the podcast, and look up his Substack and subscribe. He doesn't post very often, but when he does, it's almost always just worth reading. Chris Bray's had some really good stuff lately, and it seems like there's a something catching fire. Remember how we talked last week about that Guardians of Decay?
yes,
Mr. McGrath, what's his name? Matt, I think. Mark McGrath.
Mark McGrath,
Yeah, he writes Oda Strategist. Yeah, he wrote a really interesting essay, The Guardians of Decay: How Broken Systems Use Nice People to Silence Truth. It's the kind of thing that I think the three of us are probably pretty familiar with.
Absolutely.
But if one is not familiar with the nature of a decaying society, this is a pretty straightforward way to read it, read about it, learn about it, and then figure out how to deal with it. Um, he's one of those guys that I want to read this. I want to read this guy more, especially because he's got the whole Oda thing. Which, if you guys aren't familiar, or listeners who aren't familiar, John Boyd was a fighter pilot who developed the Oda loop, and it's just cool. It's just cool. Great way to think about thinking. It's a good way to think about thinking. But
Right.
Anyway, those are a couple guys I've read recently that it's just been like, yeah. So
Well, Mr. Mark McGrath
what have you?
will be a guest here at the Black
Oh,
Ibis Social
that
Club
happened. Oh,
on the
cool.
11th of June. So he'll be here. So
Nice. Okay. Did
we'll
you
get to
tell me
talk.
that, or did I just forget?
I think I forgot to tell you. I think
Ah, cool.
sometimes I make decisions or like I do stuff and I imagine me telling you or my wife or something, and then like
Yeah.
I realize that I just imagined the conversation in my head.
No, man, the most important thing in being a co-host is just whatever the fuck the boss says, I just roll with it. So,
Fisto's
it's
just
fine.
along for the ride,
Yeah,
man.
he
Yeah,
is.
baby, I'm gonna just hang on. Ah,
I have to remember
it's
dates and
fine.
stuff, and like update the calendar and come up with questions and stuff. If it's like, yeah, dude, you should just invite this dude, and I'm like, oh yeah, he
Invite.
seems interesting. And then I do it, and I completely forget that I do, and I'm like, oh crap, I should like send
Oh,
him the
so
link.
good. Well,
But
that'll be
no,
a really fun conversation then. Yeah, listeners, you definitely need to read up on that guy so you're prepared for that podcast. That's going to be a cool one.
I don't want to brag here.
Um,
I don't want to brag here, but like
landed him.
I'm starting to have a hard time. Like, I used to try to like do 1 month in advance, but now we're getting booked so fast that like I have to start like rejecting people. Not rejecting people, but
Oh,
pushing them further out. Like, oh, I'll get back to you because I don't want to like book too far in advance because I want to leave like open days for just in case something like really cool happens in the world and we want to talk about specific something. So like that's like our solo days, for example, are I've kind of like figured that those can be our like emergency filler gap ones in case we need to bring in a guest for, a very topical conversation about something. But I'm getting overwhelmed with like requests to be on the podcast, which is awesome.
cool.
Like it used to be
Good.
like, who can I ask? Now I'm like, I don't know, I can ask anybody I want. So we're gonna have JD Vans come on pretty soon.
Nice.
Yeah.
Um,
Outstanding.
you send your people, aren't you from Ohio? So you probably know his grandma. Go
Yeah.
ahead and shoot
Yeah,
him.
no, it's fine. I've probably got a cousin that went to school with him, so
And then
it's
after that,
fine.
Vladimir Putin is coming on.
Yeah, that's going to be a cool one. I was talking to Dugan the other day, and just kidding. That's a joke.
Or maybe the Pope. Maybe the Pope will come
Yeah,
on.
the Pope. Well, I mean, he's from Chicago. That's basically the Midwest.
That's true.
So,
I've lived in
I mean,
Chicago.
my uncle probably knows him. My uncle lived in
Ju-
Chicago for a long time, so he probably knows Pope Leo the 14th. I mean, it's the Midwest is a tightly knit place. Y'all don't really realize that.
I'm pretty
Everybody
sure
knows
John Carter
everybody.
knows him because John Carter knows
Yeah,
everybody. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. Oh, of course, John Carter knows the Pope. I mean, come on. It's obvious. It's obvious. Anyway.
All right, Uncouth. So
Yeah.
what's been new with you since our last
Yeah,
season?
man. What's up? What
Oh,
you
man.
got?
What do I got?
What you got, fool?
Man, I don't know, man. It's just been crazy and hectic. Just trying to stay ahead of the game, guys. Do we want to just jump into this rural versus city or whatever?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's do it.
So offline for you guys listening, Uncouth and I have been talking about. Let me see if I can phrase it properly to kind of lead the conversation in the direction that I think we were trying to talk about. What is the difference between rural life and urban life, and how does it pertain to our overall project? And when I mean our overall project, I mean our obviously right-leaning kind of outside the mainstream outlook and how we can improve it and how we can make life better against this kind of craptastic world of postmodernism we live in. So obviously here we've got representatives of almost all three variations, right? Uncouth, you're a rural guy because I believe you live in a rural area.
Hmm.
I grew up in Los Angeles, and that has like 5 million people in the greater Los Angeles area, and that's not including all the different like side cities attached to Los Angeles. Something like Long Beach has 600,000 population. So I grew up in a pretty big place. I was born in a pretty big place in Bucharest. I lived in Tokyo, so I'm your urban kind of person. And then Fisto, you're kind of the in-betweener, right? You're kind of the
Yeah.
suburban ex-burb. What does ex-burby? I mean, I'm not even sure what that term means.
I'm not even sure either. I'm probably best classified as sort of your wanderer, having lived in several different places all over the country, and they were typically. Let me think for you for a second. Whenever I was living in Ohio, it was typically a suburban kind of situation, Maine was urban. I lived right in the middle of Portland, Maine. Out in Colorado, it was kind of sprawlish, suburban, and then now I'm living here in this small little town. I'm just, right in the middle of town. So yeah, nothing I would say properly urban like Los Angeles or New York or anything like that, but definitely um, small town and or suburb. So I'm that
Okay.
guy.
Actually, I just read the answer from Copilot up here on my Microsoft Edge
Okay.
because that's what I've been using.
Exurban, what is that?
So suburbs,
Or exurban,
the definition
whatever you call it.
between the difference between a suburb and an exurb. Suburbs and exurbs are both residential areas outside of a city or large town, but there's a difference between the two. Suburbs are areas just outside of the city, while exurbs are areas further out beyond the suburbs. Exurbs tend to be situated in more rural areas and can be near farmland or even the beach. So I guess I live in an exurb right now.
Hmm.
Interesting. Okay.
So kind of like a suburb setup in driving distance. That's what it makes it sound like. Like it sounds very artificial.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I live in I live in a small town of 30,000 people, but it feels like a exurb
Uh,
between Savannah and Charleston, so
I,
it's kind of like in the middle.
Alex, I would guess an exurb would be like a housing division, like a developed housing edition that doesn't have like any actual amenities, like no gas station, no Walmart, no like actual places to shop or anything. That's like 30 or 45 minutes or something away from the an actual city or town or village or anything.
Right,
Like,
that makes sense.
okay.
Right.
Um, so let's see. I've been thinking about how to frame this conversation. So I'm just going to go since we're all Christians of different. Let's see. You're Orthodox. Both of me and Fisto are Catholic,
Right.
but it gives us a good like basic theological ground. Um, I'm just going to come out and say that no matter where you're based, like we should be working towards the city of God, like on a physical level, like long-term plans, whether you're rural or in any kind of burbs or urban, like you should be working physically to build the city of God. Like
Absolutely.
that's my long-term goals. Like when I'm thinking everything out here in all my like when I'm because I'm on the board of like a cemetery, I'm involved in things like I think in terms of generations. I think way down the line, and I've pushed in terms of things everything like that. So like man's final ends, and I'll get pushback from a lot of the Catholic land movement because they're retarded. If they think that you're only supposed to be on the land and only rural, that's dumb. It's the city of God. Man's final ends are supposed to be in cities. High art is the best ends. Thomas Aquinas is big about this. The only reason to get out of cities right now is because cities are bad.
Right.
Um, and I have a lot of respect for people that decide to reclaim the cities and stay in cities and all that. Um, so going rural is a strategic choice, I would say.
I
Not,
agree.
yeah. Um, so yeah,
What do you think, Fisto? Rural or urban? What do you think has value and what's the value of each?
Man, I'm trying to think of what part of that question to like bite off first.
How about I take it off, right? Okay, let me
Well,
take a stab at it, or do you want to go for it?
yeah, no, no, no. Let me say that the strategic choice that Uncouth mentioned explains my decision to move out here very, very well. I mean, I was living on the east coast of Florida, very close to Miami, which is, one of the major metropolitan areas of the East Coast. and I was already thinking about moving out to where I am now because, well, my friends are out here. I have some very close friends that I'm basically family to at this point out here. And it just, I felt drawn in this direction because of like what Uncouth said, cities are just getting bad. And then circumstance being what it is, got me into the school and, boom, here I am. Um, but it was definitely a decision to, because it feels like, correct me if I'm wrong, the cities, good cities, are going to build up out of kind of the rural foundation,
Right.
just like how plants and biology and biospheres grow up naturally out of the land. Like they're going to come from here. They're going to grow up out of this. And without this, the cities don't function, correct? I mean, someone's got to feed them, right?
Hmm.
Someone's got to provide that foundation. So when I think about the decay of culture and I think about the degeneracy of the modern world, I mean, you almost have to restart. I mean, part of our problem is that so few people sense that returning to roots, returning to basics, repentance is required, right? What do we think?
Right. I mean, I think you're right. I think, well, ultimately, what we have to kind of define is when people say return to roots, right? I mean, I don't have any roots in the country, right? I think the nearest, my nearest like country roots would have to be my great grandparents in Romania, my grandmother's. Well, actually, even further, my great grandparents. The last time my family lived in the countryside, like in a village, my grandma would tell me stories about, her as a little kid around World War II going out into the country, and visiting her grandpa who was a watchmaker during, around that time. So it's actually like I don't have a connection to the land. I've never grown food or raised animals. I don't know any of that. I've been to farms in Pennsylvania of friends that whose family all lives on the same farm, and all their friends live in the same town around their farms, and they have cattle and goats and pigs and stuff. But I have no experience with that. Um,
Hmm.
I think how we should frame the question is, um, for young men or women, right? What do we recommend, right? What do we
Sure.
recommend a young man today, one of your students leaving high school, Fisto, right? Whether they should aim for living more rural or more urban or suburban or whatever. And let me give you my answer first, right? And I hope, I guess, when you compare the two, obviously the rural areas in the United States, and only going to talk about the United States, okay? Because Europe is inverted and it's very different almost, right? The rural areas of the United States, um, and I'm talking about really rural, not like exurban, kind of like where I live. I'm talking about farms with no housing tracts and no towns or anything like that. Those are difficult. All right, they're difficult for young men to live, right? Because one, land is expensive, and maintaining a farm is very expensive, very difficult work that you can't just like, hey, I'm gonna walk into this place and become a farmer, and buy $1 million worth of like farming equipment and
Yeah.
landing rights and stuff. It's not something you just do. It's unfortunately, right? You can't just be like, hey, let me start a farm right now. I wouldn't even know where to start, right? Um, Not only that, but the goal of a young man in their 20s is to make money for themselves, make a life for themselves, meet a woman, and get married. Okay, that's the goal, right? I shared that video with you the other day. I don't know if you watched all of it or even some of it, right? About Father Josiah Tremens. He talked about how the number one issue in the modern world is the breakup of the family, right?
Yeah.
Because there is nothing more important than a man and a woman in a marriage together raising a.
Yeah, agree.
That is.
That's that's something that for me was not possible until I moved out here. My wife and I got married. It'll be a year this August since we wed. And this past year has been, we were talking this weekend, like we feel properly married. Like we feel legitimately connected. We feel like I don't want to be a young man anymore. I don't want to run around. I don't want to do any of that dumb shit that I used to do. It's just
Right.
I want to come home and I want to be with my wife and I want to build my life and God willing we'll have children and we'll have a lot of children. We're like 4 or 5 kids. Let's go. Like just go nuts. And it was only possible when for me anyway, when I got the space from the noise of the urban and the noise of the suburban, and in a lot of ways for me, the noise of the modern.
So, so I want to push back a little bit on the cost. Um, if you're looking at a homestead instead of actual farming. So you're looking at a homestead and making food on the side type of thing and
Right.
working a job.
Real fast, define homestead for us because I don't want to use the wrong
Sure,
terminology.
sure.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're buying something between 10 and 30 acres, and you're making food for yourself that you might sell a little bit of on the side. Um, and, and in most of the Midwest, and down south, you can get land for between $1,000 and $5,000 an acre, depending on where you're at. So, and then the house will be about 80 to 100,000 on top of that. So you're generally looking at about 200,000 to $300,000 for 5 to 30 acres. And if you have a full-time job on top of that, you can raise a family for a reasonable amount of money. And if you live in a community of like-minded people that can help you out on things with skills and with everything else, which is what I'd recommend. So, for instance, I live next to a church, a traditional Catholic church, where not like 90% of my neighbors are moved here for the exact same reasons I did. So I've never paid for a babysitter, even though I have 6 children. Um, I if I had to go to the hospital and my wife needed to drive me, I could call someone at 10 o'clock at night, midnight. They would come over. Um, if my car broke down, I could call and borrow a car from someone. Like those kinds of support systems make it very cheap and affordable to live and raise a family. Um, I can raise pigs out here, cut down costs. Like those things make it very affordable to start living rural and still make money. Um, I don't make much money, but I also own a business. So even though tax wise I don't make as much, it's because I have deductions. And if I wanted to make more as an electrician, I could make 3 times as much more if I was willing to give up some of my freedoms and work either union or non-union for a company. Um, like that's just the reality. And there are people out here that work um not like um at home. There are people that work all across, like that travel all across the country. There are people that work for the Defense Department. um like there are ways to make it work. um Now, so that's just the physical side of things. I'd We can get into a little bit of the philosophical side of things too, if we wanted to. Um,
Right.
yeah,
Well, to ask you a question about that, and I'm very ignorant about the topic of living in a rural life, so I'm fully deferring to you, and that's why if I ask a question, it's because I honestly don't know, and thank you for
sure.
correcting me on that. Um, I wouldn't even know where to get started, as a young man in my 20s living in a city to even, I mean, I was afraid of like the dark, basically, hypothetically, right? Um, so did you, okay, were you born into a small community, like a rural area, or did you move from a bigger city into that kind of rural area?
Um, I grew up in the foothills of Colorado. I went to the University of Denver. And then I went and studied for a theater degree. I moved out to Portland, Oregon, and lived there for 2 years doing theater and working at Starbucks. Um, I then did a year in grad school in Boston. I dropped out because I hated it, and then I worked 2 years doing set and lighting design in Boston or in Chicago rather. And just used the contacts that I developed in Boston and um, just worked as a starving artist there. Um, and started developing leadership skills and started wanting to be Christian again. Started looking and around at different faiths and walked into a Latin Mass church, St. John Cantius there, a traditional Latin Mass, and decided the first Mass I walked into, I wanted to be Catholic. So I dropped all my contracts and applied all over the country. I found a job in the Midwest, and then I moved down there, and then I started for the first time changing my own oil, um, and got a job first in the city, and then I moved out into the country about 10, 11 years ago. And that's when I first started getting the skills. Um, so no, I didn't. I lived in city and urban life my whole life.
That's awesome. So you're exactly the kind of person I'm talking about, the kind of person that we should be listening to, like you have the experience, you have the, the knowledge because you did it. You did the thing, and that's awesome, man. Like, so what would you say are some of the benefits, whether it's, economically, morally, spiritually, culturally about living in a more rural area versus like a city like Chicago?
Um, the the quiet and the peace, like it's hard to describe it, but you have like real relationships with people, and at times that's like super frustrating and hard because you get like you imagine the most annoying relate like like hate arguments you have with people online, and then realize that you're having that with your neighbor and you just have to get over it,
Because you live
like
next to him, yeah.
because you live next to them. Because for the first time ever, people have you can't just stop talking to someone because we're so enculturated to people, like being able to say whatever you want to people, that you still start saying it, especially when you've had a couple of drinks. um but then you have to get over it. But it's just wonderful. I live in a state that doesn't have like really any laws about how you have to live once you get out of the cities. So at times that's terrifying once you see like how these meth heads and everything ha- choose to live, and what your neighbors, what some of the non Catholic and religious neighbors are like, and sometimes it's amazing because you have the freedom to raise your children however you want. Um, I don't have to worry about random people transing my children. I don't
Right.
have to um, worry about any of that. What I have to worry about is the kinds of crazy religious uh, ideas that my neighbors have been poorly taught and catechized. And those are just hard conversations.
Right. Well, and that's kind of, you get people online, you get people on that say stuff like, okay, you need to move to the rural area. It's gonna be great. But there's a lot of difficulties to it. I have one question. I'm assuming you're married because you have 6 children, you're a Catholic. Did you meet your wife before or after the move to the rural area?
We met in a church before the move. We courted. We both um, we met at a church, and then um, I was in the process of moving out here, and then I found her a place to live uh, fairly next door because she was stopping her employment. So I helped her find a job and find a place to live. And so we moved out here into the community and courted and got engaged out here.
That's awesome. That's so you guys like decided to move there together and kind of start like a new kind of community with, and um, I'm sure you've already did a lot of research before you picked a spot, right? I'm hoping you did, right?
I had been coming out here to visit like for 3 months beforehand, and I'd
Okay.
been coming out every other weekend for like 3 months beforehand at visiting families and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, I think we often talk um, on different podcasts and stuff. I hear Dave Green talk about it, and a lot of other guys talk about it, and people go, okay, but what's the advice you give? What should we do? What do we? What's the practical thing? We can talk about it, we can intellectualize it, right? And one of the big questions, like the big problems with the rural versus urban kind of divide, is that whether the rural bros or the rural faction of our party, and it's interesting enough if you look at the different political parties throughout history, they've had rural and urban kind of versions, right? And the the truth is, well, even Christianity itself, I think one of the geniuses of Christianity and the reason it's first of all it's true, but one of the great things about Christianity is that it is at the same time both a rural and a urban religion, right?
Mhm.
And whether the rule bros, and I'm just making that term up right now for this conversation, right? Um, like to admit it or not, humans live in societies. Humans live as groups, and the urban center, the city, is the birthplace of ideas. It's the birthplace of universities, and they naturally grew around city centers, church centers. Early Christianity, which we look at for guidance a lot, I think, is ultimately, sorry, I had to cough. It's ultimately an urban thing, right? The early centers of Christianity were Rome, Alexandria, um, Constantinople later on, and Antioch, Corinth, and all those places. And they were around a large community of Christians at first living, underground, but they were also, doing it on the down low. But eventually, they became cities, giant urban centers run by bishops and eventually archbishops, and the churches that were small eventually turned into cathedrals. And the theological ideas and ecumenical ideas all came out of large groups of people, universities, and you need that, right? For a movement, for a system to work, right? You need
Hmm.
an urban center because you know that's where the universities are, and whether we like it or not, the universities control opinion, right? That's what teaches the next generation, and you do it through that's where the libraries are. That's where the centers of culture, the theaters, the movie makers, the writers, they all live in urban areas for the most part, and that's how they communicate. um, Now, with that, you get, the crime, the drugs, the wanton degeneracy that a decayed city causes. On the opposite end, in the rural community, you have, like everything you've said, the freedom to do more things and to kind of run things your own way. You have the freedom, the safety in a lot of places, right? Not that all rural areas are safe. There's a lot of unsafe rural areas, and then there's a lot of safe cities. But for the most part in the United States, the more rural is, the more safer you are. The more I can't even pretend, homogeneity,
Homogeneous.
homogeneous population, where you're more likely to have very similar kind of backgrounds. But one thing that we need to realize is that at least most of us and our opinions that seem to be the standard shared opinion through a lot of Substacks, podcast blogs, we're still in a very minority intellectually speaking, right? Our ideas, um, if we talk to the the quintessential normie, right? Normie conservative would be like, "Oh, bro, okay, man, that's too far for me." You want what? Yeah, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, and we have to sugarcoat some of our opinions when we talk to people, right? And unfortunately, because the universities are in the cities, you tend to have kind of a brain drain in the countryside that all goes towards the cities, and
Hmm.
the young people that are intelligent are not going to live in rural land USA. They're going to go live in San Francisco. They're going to go live in Chicago or in New York or the suburbs of those cities because they need to get jobs. They want to get paid, right? And it's hard to make a lot of money in a rural area, but it's also hard to get the intellectual stimulation in a rural area, unfortunately, because your neighbor might be nice and he might even be a good Christian, but he probably doesn't read as much or is involved as much in the intellectual aspect of the faith or the political aspect that we discuss.
Hmm.
So that's
Hmm.
why you've had kind of this uh, urban um, rule break, and it's difficult because you can be alone in a large city. You can be a lone guy with certain beliefs that tend to be more right wing, and you can be alone in a urban city of liberals like Portland. But you will find people that have share the same beliefs. You find them through secret codes, and you drop a word that something based that's on the DL, that some frog Twitter stuff or whatever, and you find them, right? But it's very hard to find like-minded people um, in a rural area because you just don't interact with as many people, and the people that are around tend to be older, more boomer generation, and even if they are closer to you in your day-to-day life, um, politically, socially, they might not be as close to you in the more intellectual level. And that's very difficult if you're going to be trying to move forward momentum in the overall conversation, right? And if you're really trying to make change, it's difficult to do it on your own. And that's why I think it's tough. But I do have one interesting point, right? And this is to our benefit, is the internet. For all the internet's ills, the internet has made a in-between life very doable, right? Because with the ability to reach so much information and the ability to order books and be able to still engage in conversation from a more rural area with people in a urban area, you've kind of bridged this gap that exists. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Um, I maybe I think that no matter urban or rural, you need that people need to like physically move together. So like I have friends that live in in an urban environment in the city nearby, and I'll just be honest in that I don't take the ones them seriously that they're trying to build it build anything lasting except for the ones that physically move near the parish, because they're the ones that are daily going to the liturgy. They're the ones that are daily involving themselves in the community. Like, and they're the ones that are going to have some kind of social order as society breaks down. Um, and, but I guess that gets back to where I think that our empire is in terms of things. I think that our empire is really at like just completely breaking down. I don't think that we are that anyone is going to come help us. Maybe Trump will be able to get it together and everything. I have no idea, but I think that everything is tending towards localism, even if he does. Like everything is going to get more local,
Right.
um, and that we need to build things up. And that's why I think whether either urban or rural or anything else, people need to come together into that community, into that aid of each other. Um, and help one another. Because okay, let's just get into a little bit. Let's make Aristotle great again. Um,
Great
let's do
idea.
it.
Great
Let's do
idea.
it.
Always.
And this will get back to some of your podcasts with like Constantine and some of that. So during the Roman Empire, what who were Romans? Who were the actual Romans of the Roman Empire?
That's a tough question. That's
Um,
loaded historically.
um, were the barbarians that ruled Rome, the Roman Empire? Like were they Roman, or was it only the tribes of Rome? Where do we call any of the French currently Roman? Like, or was it only and everywhere just the tribes of Rome?
Right. I mean, if you want to be like a pure, like kind of like natalist kind of viewpoint on it, it would be the tribes of Rome in the Republic era. But then if you want to say who's part of the Roman Empire, then you'd have to add the Gauls and the Dacians and everybody all the way up,
Yeah,
to the Byzantines.
yeah. So I think this it gets into distinctions of citizens of Rome and then tribes of Rome. So there are citizens of Rome, and then there are like Iberians and Germans and stuff like that, which is fine. There are absolutely citizens of Rome while there are Romans. Just because the Romans conquered the Italians and then conquered the Germans and everything else doesn't make them Roman, I don't think, does it?
I mean,
Yeah,
I guess.
Rome kind of has this thing where it almost does this sleight of hand where sometime after the empire and sometime after the Pax Romana, Rome changes from a political organization or a imperial organization into an ideal.
But that's the same with all empires. The
Yeah.
Spanish Empire conquering conquering all of like South America doesn't make this like the Indians Spanish, the French conquering like all of Europe doesn't make all of Europe French, does it?
Right. No, no, you're
No,
right.
no, no,
Well,
no.
yeah, they didn't have control of it long enough to make it Spanish or
But
to make it French.
yeah, yeah. So in America, I would argue that in terms of like American, it was the British Protestants that are American genealogy, like genetically, and that the rest of us are citizens of America. But the nation of America, in terms of genetics, are the British, like the British descendants.
Yeah.
Um, and that we've had barbarian rulers. The historians will come back and say, "Oh, this date they started to have barbarian rulers."
Mm.
Do you see where I'm going with
Right.
this?
Yeah. Well,
Absolutely. Yeah.
like Diocletian being from Split,
Yeah,
or not from Split, but from the
but
um Croatian part of the empire, what would be Croatian.
then when you start looking at what the actual government of America has done, it's been really gnarly. The government of America has done everything it can to actually break up the nations, the actual genetic nations of the non-British. Like it's done what it can to use eminent domain to break up different um, Irish neighborhoods and import blacks during World War II. It's done everything it can to make the rest of it us mutts.
Right.
Like so, in terms of the empire ruling over us, do we have any actual nations within the American empire? I like besides the Native Americans, maybe the Pennsylvania Dutch, like some of the Amish, like
Right. So, which makes it very difficult to do any type of uh, organization on a national tribal line, at least
mm-hmm,
for us. Uh, Obviously, I'm a foreigner, right? So I'm a foreigner, and I'm married to an Irish American whose family came here in early 20th century. So I guess her family would be Ellis Islanders. Well, her my wife's half her family is Ellis Islanders, and the other half is like gangs of New York, 19th century kind of immigrants, from Ireland and Scotland, while the other side is like Polish from the kind of like the
mm-hmm,
20th century, which is what most Americans are, to be honest, right? I don't, I've met some what you would call foundational Americans, but I live in the deep South, and I'm surrounded by Northerners or people from I'm surrounded by Ohioans, to be honest,
yeah,
Midwesterners that have moved down here, and uh, if you were to bring like the sons and daughters of the Confederate Army or whatever, you'd find like five people probably, and they don't live here anymore. So it's very difficult to do any type of organization upon those lines. And then you throw in,
yeah,
religious denominations, the 13,000 different variations of Protestant you have in this country, and uh, Roman Catholics, which you guys are great, but you guys are also very much split on ethnic lines between the Hispanic Roman
mm-hmm,
Catholics and Italians and Irish and that kind of stuff. So it's
yeah.
very difficult to assess it.
No, all I'm saying is that now we have a definition there. And now let's go to Aristotle's definition of cities and Thomas Aquinas's too, which it would be a city also has to include the rural countryside, which would support it,
Right.
Mm.
which which also would have a give and take aspect of the culture and the religion. So a city then is one with the rural countryside And then if we're trying to like have actual cities, like it kind of incorporates like a, a unified nation idea, a unified race, a unified religion. So if we're trying to have like an aspect in which we're an urban aspect or a rural aspect where we have a an idea where we're trying to reclaim the things that matter to us, like law, culture, religion, art, like these things that matter, we should at least have these definitions in mind, I would argue, and work towards them. So, at least to me, like race is something that just happens naturally when people of like-minded religion or culture just get together and naturally have babies. Like, so to me, like, that's not a big deal. I'm gathered around a church where me and my neighbors are hashing out different religious beliefs and coming closer and closer because we're all traditional Latin Mass Catholics, and some you never met a people that were closer and more angry about how close we were in religion sometimes. um, but our children not are getting married and having babies. Um, and it's wonderful and beautiful.
Right.
And eventually there will be a city here of Catholics, and that's our goal. And if you're doing something in the city, wonderful. I just think that you should do it near a parish, like or a church or like you should have something in mind with the city of God, going back to how we started this conversation. Does
Right.
that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And like, let me see what you're saying, okay? Because I'm trying to put it in terms that would be used as advice. You're saying that the ideal like living arrangement situation is one where you are around a church that is a like-minded church, you know, and one where you share a space with neighbors that are very much similar, maybe not identical and maybe not perfect, but shared some general shared traits. And then you, together with those people, build a community from there up with the goal of growing larger. And so you're not talking about going out there out into the rural Montana and raising horses or whatever, you know, you're talking about uh, a village basically, right? A village that becomes a town, becomes a city is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, so for instance, the church in the city that um I live next to is on the outskirts. Like, technically, it's not in the city proper, it's in the county, technically, which means that they're allowed, even on a quarter of an acre, to build a pig pen. Like, so even though some of my friends have just a quarter of an acre, they can have one or two pigs, and they can have six chickens as long as they don't have a rooster. Like, when you start to get into these kinds of silly details, even though they're across the street, like you're literally in the city proper, once you know the zoning and the zoning laws, you can literally like be living in an urban environment, and you might be able to have some chickens and a pig. Like,
Right, right. See, it's interesting because the church I go to, They have a pretty large plot of land, and they're actually building a new church. And I was talking to one of the guys that he's one of those guys that goes to church every day. He's there, like he lives there. Every time I drop in, he's been there, and he paints the church. He does all the upkeep and stuff. And his father-in-law is a deacon in the church, and he was telling me that like he's like the plan is to like get chickens and all this stuff in this land and do all this stuff. And I was like, that's awesome, because we live in a kind of this exurb area where you're allowed to do that. It unlike, a big city, or you're allowed to have chickens, you're allowed to have like goats and that type of stuff by the zoning laws. I think it's wonderful. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I fully agree. I think we're in complete like agreement when it comes to that. Now, one of the things that we have to kind of address is though, right, is that we need to make sure that our kids stay, right,
Hmm.
or if they leave, they come back, right.
Yeah.
And that's the difficult part, because there's so many communities that are aging beyond belief. They're falling apart because everybody
Yeah.
that lives there is like 80, you know?
That's the challenge that I have in my town, where it's the kids leaving and maybe not coming back. Um, and part of that is they've got to have reasons to come back.
Hmm.
Kids aren't just going to come back because mom and dad are here, although it'd be nice if that is enough, but that's not the world we live in.
So,
So I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. I mean, there's definitely plenty of churches here. I think getting involved in my theater in the theater group is going to be important, because if there's something cool going on there, that's going to provide a reason for people to come back. But listening to the discussion, I think of myself as a high school teacher, and I think about what my role is here, and it's probably to give them an example of somebody, or give them an example to carry with them wherever they end up going and wherever they find themselves, so that the things on the inside that are most important remain preserved, whether they leave or stay or whatever they end up doing. I don't know, just a few random thoughts, but what do you guys think? Because yeah, I definitely want to talk about that.
the ones that I've seen here, and granted, my eldest is 6, so I'm going to say right off the bat, I am not an expert in getting children to stay. I have
Yeah.
This is only observational experience. The ones that I've seen stay are the ones that see a future. So,
Mm.
um, so I would just say, like, women and children, like, you need to get them something to dream for. Like, for me, like, my ability to attract my wife was giving her something that she could see herself as part of a dream. Like, I was always upfront, like, with my wife. I see myself like not making much money. I want a homestead. I want to live a traditional Catholic life. This is where you would fit into this. Like, this is my dream. I have ground plans to show it. Like, when we were dating and everything, we were back and forth on the phone, like, I was doing drawings of the ground plans for if we were able to build a home and this and that. Like, you need to give your like children something that they could be, or something that they could do. Like, the ones that I see stay here, they do that. Otherwise, they go off to college and they're just gone.
Right.
Like, or they go off to join the military. And if they're join the military, who knows where they end up? Like,
Right. The military is built to be a deracinating institution. The way it's set up to basically destroy bonds 100%.
mhm.
Right. Like it is engineered that way. It is made to where you cannot make friends and you cannot live in the same place for very long. Your average person in the military moves from duty station to duty station every 2 to 3 years, and it's very difficult to stay in the same place or even in the same area unless you have like friends in the detailing kind of community. And it's made to t sever bonds in a way. and it's I think it's engineered that way on purpose in the postmodern post current like world. So it's definitely a place that um, people always say that like, oh, the military is a lot of conservative people, which is absolutely, absolutely wrong. Um, I have seen over many years that I was in the military that the military is actually the exact opposite. Conservatives that grew up in small communities join the military, like a lot of times Mormons or other religious type kids join, and they are brought in, exposed to just outright degenerates in the military, right? And that's just the truth of it. And they don't become more conservative in the military. They actually become very much more liberal in the military. They might be conservative in political leanings, but they are absolutely liberal in their day-to-day life and their acceptance. They're exposed to people from all like the entire world basically, and due to travel and that type of thing, they become a lot more liberal in a kind of a traditional sense than conservative, and very deracinated from their families back home.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean the military is a loss. If people join the military, it's a loss to your community. Now, what I think, and I think you nailed it there. You have to give them a dream, a purpose, right? I think that one thing we need to do as fathers and husbands is we need to kind of re-enchant the way we do everything in life, right? Where we need to stop treating our houses as disposable, product, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's the problem. There's a huge problem, right? Our houses are disposable product, right? They're no longer homes. It's like it's something you buy, and I live here for 10 years until I can afford a better place, right? We need to have houses that are multi-generational, like houses that are homes, houses that, because most houses right now that people live in are disposable, paper houses basically that they're only, you only live in them until you can sell it for more. And then once you sell it, you make the profit and you move into a bigger house or somewhere else, and then you live there until you sell it, and then you die, and your kids sell it off, and they have no emotional connection to the place. There is definitely a way we need to start approaching the house, the home, Um, you go to Savannah or Los Angeles, any of the bigger cities or, the bigger suburbs, and you'll often see in a town like Savannah or Charleston, where it's like this house belonged, this is where Flannery O'Connor was born, and this is her home, and it's got a plaque, We don't have that anymore,
Hmm.
like if most of our Gen Z kids, when they become old and if they become like a famous writer or something like that, nobody's gonna put a plaque in front of the tract home made out of plastic because it's not even gonna be there. It's gonna be torn down in 20 years, right? So the way we approach our home is important, and I think one way to do that is to make the home a sacred place, right? Uh, Make it to where you take your kids and you work on it. You paint it, you build something in the backyard, you plant flowers in a garden. You do the chickens thing, or somewhere where that becomes theirs. It's not just a place that they're spiritually renting, because we need to get away from being spiritual renters. I mean, what do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. And there are a ton of ways to do that. It's like, especially if their children are homeschooled or you have time in the evenings to do things. Like, there are so many ways that children can craft and do things. And if you have something that you can set up in the like at the altar, like if you have a home altar or something somewhere in the house, I know we do, and we try and set up different stuff with the liturgical season and decorate it different seasons. We have different craft stuff that the wife has. The children put all over the house for different things. Um, we have different garden stuff that goes on outside, but even like urban life, you can do different stuff. with different things. So absolutely.
Right. Like it doesn't, your house doesn't have to be amazing. It doesn't have to be this expensive mansion or anything like that. It just has to become a home. And you do it by treating it like a home. You do it by treating your neighborhood and your neighbors as a home, you know? And if I have one goal towards my daughter, for example, I if she's anything like me, okay, which I know she will be because I can see it already. If she's anything like me or my cousins or my other family members, she's gonna get smacked by the wanderlust like I did. Like I had to get out. I lived in a town of 600,000 people, and it was too small. I need to leave. Like that's probably something that like all young people in there. It's part of our kind of like mythological growth where we have to leave, right? I so I accept that. There's a reality that my daughter will one day leave and go off to college, maybe see the world, but I want her to come back. I want there to be a place. I want to be able to, and I'm working on it every single day, right? I want her to be able to go, oh, I can't wait to get back home because I know that I will always have a home where mom and dad live in this house. There will always be a place for me. I will always be welcome. I will always have a place to rest my head. I will always have a place with memories in it. It will always be like that. And I want that to be, the same thing for our church, right? I want her to come back home and go, wow, I can just walk into the church and I'm at home again. It's mine, it's my place. And our generation, I don't know about you, Fisto, or you, Uncouth, but I was robbed of that, for multiple reasons, right? I was robbed of that. I immigrated to the US and I had no choice in it because I was, 6 years old and my mom moved us over. And I recently went back to Bucharest about a year and a half ago, and I went into my grandma's house there in the center of Bucharest, and this was the house that you know my great grandfather basically bought or purchased or whatever you did back then, right? And he lived there. My grandfather and my grandma lived there. My dad and uncle were born, and grew up in that house. Next door, my grandfather's brother's family lived, and they still live there, right? And this is in a super urban area, right? And I remember being a little kid there and kind of like playing and stuff. And I walked in, and like I felt like I was home. I haven't been there in, oh my God, like 34 years, right? 34 years. And I walked in and I knew where everything was, right? I knew that there was a stairway that led up to the second floor. I knew that there was a basement that had a bunch of stuff in it. I knew where everything was like 34, 35 years later. And I it's like you could feel the spirit of all the people that lived in that place, you know? And the garden that my grandma had, it's all gone. It's wilted, but it's dying, right? And it's going to be gone because I live in the United States. I can't take it over. My uncle left, he's retiring in a different country. He's retiring in Malta because he's old and he wants to live in Malta. I have a cousin that's probably going to take it, but she's young in her 20s. I have another cousin that's a doctor and she flies around the world. It's going to be gone. And it makes me so sad that so many of us don't have that, or I don't, it's gone, right? Does that make sense at all?
Oh, absolutely. I know this property that I'm on, like I'm hoping it's 30 acres and I'm hoping to build like three or four houses on it for my kids. Like I'm hoping to that I will be able to figure out legally how to put a trust together that they can't divide it up and sell it, that they'll have to do it generationally and figure out how to make it work like as a family and everything else that they'll have to do all that, like, because I want a legacy. I want like a family legacy that survives more than just me. Like, it needs to just keep growing. You know, like
Right.
this, everyone alive now should realize that we are living in the same kind of times after the fall of any empire, after the fall of the Roman Empire, after the fall of the French or the Spanish Empire. We have the same kind of opportunities to make this world afresh.
Right.
That's the kind of feeling that I have in my soul.
I agree. I feel like it's actually, we're living in a good time. All right. I mean, yes, it is objectively not, but at the same time, you know what? It is a time of opportunity, uh, I think, for the right people with the right mindset, right? Because we can
Yeah.
do things differently than it's been done. A lot of the secular religion, the convictions are falling apart, and it allows us to finally break away from some of the silliness and some of the straight up suicidal ideas that we've taken like as as gospel for the last 60 years, and what you consider the post-war kind of consensus. And we can actually reject some of that, and we can even reject some of the stuff before that for the first time in my life. So you're right, it
Exactly.
is a joyous time in a way.
Exactly. We can go out there and we can just say and have these conversations like we're having here and just start saying, you know what, Alex, what kind of moral codes do you and I want to live with in this world? What kind of dress codes do we want to live with? What kind of art and architecture do we want our city to have? Well,
Right.
why don't we write that into law?
Right.
If we can get together and enforce it, why don't we just have beautiful architecture and force everyone to it? You know what? I'm okay with that.
Right.
Let's just say no. We're not going to let you put this ugly rubbish heap up. Like, I'm totally okay with that because this enlightenment trash needs to go out the window. And I only want beautiful things in my town.
Right.
Like, and that's wonderful. It's great. And and I am in a rural area that has so many years that I can have conversations with people that we can work out these things. That's why I like the rural area rather than the urban one. Is it gives us time to work through all this enlightenment garbage.
Right. No,
Like,
I agree, man. You're absolutely on point. So I think now we need to kind of touch on one key thing, though, right? Now, in my opinion, and the very important thing, because this leads to a problem that is in our sphere, right? It's discussed, but I never really see good answers to this, right? Is none of the stuff you're talking about and that we're talking about right now can happen without a family, right?
mhm.
And I'm talking about the basic unit, the husband wife, right? And because you can't just go out there and do all this by yourself, right? Like, this is not a solo project. This is a family and a community project, right? I think you need the bare minimum. You need that duo, right? That
Mhm.
union. So many of the young guys nowadays are having a hard time meeting women, getting married, selling them on this idea. And I we see this question asked over and over on so many podcasts, so many conversations. You have the guys that are like, forget women, women are horrible, blah, 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 and they move away. And then you have guys that are like the kind of like Andrew Tate-ist kind of dudes that like are just basically, pseudo pimps and pornographers and that kind of thing. And we cannot build anything without this core Lego block, right? I mean, this is the cornerstone of any community is the family, right?
Mhm.
And how do we solve that? How do we get our guys to get married? How do we get our girls to get married? What is the solution for that?
You know,
Mhm.
Alex, I honestly, for 20-year-olds, I don't have answers because I've been out of it for 15 years. When I was in it, was 12, 15 years ago, and my answer then was literally just going like practicing going up to women and simply having conversations, dancing, and like I was going to swing dance lessons and learning how to dance. I was learning how to talk to people. Like I would talk to literally every girl could talk to at a coffee shop or anything else, and literally teaching myself how to talk to people and being a regular at everywhere that I went to, so that you build up that social status, so that when I went somewhere on a date, I literally could talk to a bartender, I could talk to um, anyone, and they would know me. I would be a regular. So you have that social proofing, so that if like a menu changed somewhere where you were a regular, I could literally order something that was off the menu, and they would do it for me.
Right.
Um, because I would be tipping them well, and I was a friend to them. So, like, and I would be chatting up the church leaders. So I was a friend to all the dads. Like people just knew me because I knew how to play the social hierarchy games. Like, I don't know. I don't know how to tell young men just go out there, talk to women, talk to dads, and do the social hierarchy games. I mean,
Right.
that doesn't work for everyone because not everyone can be up there on the social hierarchy. Like,
Right. Well,
I
what I
think some of
think,
it,
go ahead. I'm
sorry,
sorry.
I think some of it is correctly identifying what the problem is. And to take it back to the beginning of the podcast, I'll just defer to Solzhenitsyn. It's cowardice. That's why it doesn't happen. That's why people don't go out and talk to girls. That's why people don't go out and, seek a seek the city of God, build something meaningful. They don't do that because they're afraid. And it's a symptom of the culture. Now, it doesn't mean they have to be afraid, but no one wants to hear that online. No one wants to hear, oh well, the reason you can't do it is because you're a fucking coward and you got to go do it before you can start complaining about doing it. You know?
yeah, because the boys in my community, like they're talking to the girls in my community, like, but it's a traditional Catholic community. There's not the the modernism. Like most of them don't have internet as much of a distraction. I don't know if they spend more than 5 hours a week on the internet. And most of that is probably shopping for cars and things on Facebook Marketplace for them to buy and fix up. like, like we just don't have the same modern distractions and issues here. They're working and they're like doing things that boys and girls would have been doing 50 years ago. Does
Right.
that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. But here's my take, right? And I actually want, you know what? I want listeners to push back on this. Okay, because I know we have some younger male listeners, so they're gonna. I want to have some arguments against this. Okay, so if you listen to this, go ahead and comment on the episode or wherever. Let me know, because here's the thing, right? Right away to everything you guys said, the main arguments are like, well, you fucking boomers, you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, that's great advice, pulling yourselves up by the bootstraps. But today, gosh, you don't know with Tinder and everything, and all women are hoe bags and blah, blah, blah. And, the socio-sexual marketplace is completely ruined. So to that, what I say is, first of all, right, get off the internet. Get off the freaking internet, okay? Because first of all, if you're on Tinder, Tinder is a website that's based off of Grindr, which was a gay hookup site. Okay, Tinder came out after Grindr, and Grindr was a gay cruising site. Right? Tinder is a hookup site. If you're on Tinder and you're a Christian, you're wrong. Get off of it. Right? It's a hookup site. Okay, that's what it is. You're never gonna. I mean, I'm sure there's examples and good blah blah blah, and people that met each other off of Tinder that fell in love and everything, right? But it's ultimately a hookup site. All right, plain and simple. It is a messed up, like, just wrong thing, right? Two, what I have to say with that, I happen to work with a lot of young people, right? And guess what? I'm going to two weddings, right? Both of them, the guys are under 25. All right. And
That's awesome.
I'm actually going to go to a Roman Catholic wedding in August, and I'm looking forward to it, because I haven't been to a Roman Catholic wedding my entire life. And under 25, attractive people, intelligent people, like, come on, man. It's out there. I know tons of young guys and girls that are married. I know tons of young guys and girls that have decent relationships and are probably going to be married in the next few years, right? So it's out there. I'm not talking from a lack of experience, right? Get off the freaking internet, okay? Do not let the negativity and the downerism of the internet wreck your mind, all right? The people on the internet are not real. They're mostly demons. Just avoid it, all right? It's just not good, all right? And if you use the internet, be very discerning in how you use the internet, right? And only look for things that are positive and have good advice, okay? Because the internet, if you listen to, just stay away from it. Like, you shouldn't, that's not how you build families. Now, my advice, okay, is that you got to be you. That's the key. And I know it sounds corny, right? But you cannot be a bug man. You cannot be a blob. You cannot be human yeast. All right. You have to be you. If you're a Christian, all right, you need to be a good Christian. Become part of it. Participate. Become a great example and just go out there. Your goal should not be to find a wife. Your goal should be to find yourself, and then a wife will find you. All right. Because if you are a good Christian, you're doing the right stuff, you're taking part in the community, the church, the intellectual environment around it, God will provide, right? Consider the birds of the air, right? Like, you will be given, if that's the path that God wants for you, he will give it to you. All right. Become interesting, right? Like, find yourself. If you're in intellectualism, become very intellectual. Read, develop yourself, go out, put yourself out, go hiking, go do this, go do that. You know what I mean? Don't do it to look for a wife. Do it because you love it. Do stuff you genuinely love, and then you will find people that want to be with you. Be the kind of person that both males and females want to be around. Okay? If you're a creepy dude that sits in his basement playing video games all day, nobody's going to be around you except creepy dudes that will sit in their basement all day. Right? So you have to be the person that people want to be around. And in order to do that, you have to get yourself spiritually in check. And once you do that, people will find you. I'll tell you guys how I met my wife. Did I ever tell you, Fist, how I met my wife?
No, you haven't.
Okay. So I was in the military. I was with the infantry, right? And I was before I deployed to Afghanistan, I was convinced that I was going to die, right? I kind of joined the military a little bit late, and I had this Lieutenant Dan kind of mindset where I'm going to go and I'm going to die. That's my plan. It was very nihilistic, atheist kind of insanity that I kind of developed in my mind, right? Like I was like, I just want to go to a war and I want to die. Like, don't do what I did, right? And leading up to my adventures in Afghanistan, I focused on that, and I also focused on like meeting people, and like I shamefully slept around and did all that stuff, right? But I decided that I am done with women. All women are just not worth it, and I'm just going to become spiritually focused on myself only. That was my plan. I remember the moment I did that. I was laying down in the desert somewhere in Afghanistan, and I was looking up at the sky, and it was just beautiful. I could see the Milky Way, and I don't know if anybody's been in the military. You turn on your NVGs, which are night vision goggles for you guys, and you can actually see like every star perfect, like the swirls of the Milky Way. It's just amazing, and you can see them with the naked eye, even like out there, because there's no cities or anything for miles and miles and miles. And I had this moment where I was like, you know what? I just want to be alone. I don't need complications in my life. I'm done. I'm done trying to meet women. They're all disappointing and blah blah blah. I was kind of like, I'm over it. And you know what? I didn't die in Afghanistan. I came back home, and a month later, I was hanging out at a bar, and it's funny enough, right? I had a friend of mine, and it was around Christmas time, and a friend of mine is like, "Hey, Alex, let's go out." So we went out, and there was these two girls there, and they're like really annoying. I was like not into them whatsoever. One of them, I remember to this day, she had a Metallica, the Metallica logo, like that skull thing or whatever, right? No, like the Metallica Ride the Lightning logo. She had that tattooed as a tramp stamp, and I was like, oh my God, man, I'm not even talking to these girls. And I was kind of a dick. I was kind of a jerk to him. I was like not interested. You just, ugh. And I was not a good wingman in bar
Man,
hopping.
cringe tattoo though in the cringe spot. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
oh damn.
Oh,
All
dude, no,
right.
I was a bad
That's
wingman for
just
him, and he was
no man,
so
that's bail out. That's just scrub the mission. Like
right.
that's being a good wig, man. But boss, we're getting out of here.
Well, that's exactly. I like pissed them off, and they left. I was just being like an arrogant. I was like, "I'll go away. You're stupid." I wasn't being nice, and I feel bad for it. But like this is just how it was, right? And this is my friend Daryl. I love you, Daryl. I haven't seen you in like 10 years, but um, he was mad at me, man. He was so mad. He's like, "Oh, like so, what the, like how And so Daryl goes home for Christmas. He goes to see his family in Washington D.C. and he's gone for a week. He's on his way back. And I'm in California, and he calls me and he's like, "Hey man, can you pick me up at the airport?" And it's like a Tuesday or a Thursday or something like that, a Wednesday night, right? And Wednesdays are like my lucky night, by the way. That's where we do the podcast on Wednesdays. And I pick up Daryl, and I'm driving him home, and he's like, I picked him up at John Wayne Airport. If you guys are familiar with California, it's a pretty moto sounding airport, John Wayne. It's in Orange County. And we're driving home, and he's like, "Hey man, you want to go out for a few drinks?" I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds good, man. I'm here. I have like a month off of work. I don't have to do anything. Sure, let's do it." So he goes, "But you got to promise me, man. You got to promise me, man, that you're not going to do that shit again. You're not going to be the giant, blue falcon." You guys know what blue falcon is?
No.
No.
Blue falcon, right, is a military joke term. It stands for buddy fucker, right? So you call people blue falcons that like kind of screw you over or screw over their own side, like military police. They're all blue falcons, So he's like, you can't be blue falconing me. You got to be a good wingman. So I go, "Okay, I promise, I promise, I promise her." So we go to this dive bar in the middle of South Orange County, outside of Camp Pendleton, and it's empty. I mean, there is nobody there. I'm like, yes, exactly the kind of bar. Because I'm like, listen, I don't go to bars to pick up women. I go to bars to pick up beers, And I'm sitting there. We're enjoying some drinks. I'm having a beer. So I was actually having a dirty martini. I remember this exactly because my wife points it out to me. And this blonde girl walks up to us, right? And she's kind of, in the terminology of the day, she's kind of a broho. You know what I'm talking about? Broho, Fisto?
Broho. I
Broho.
haven't. I haven't quite heard this formulation, but it.
So a broho
Explain
is
for me.
like your like kind of like country blonde girl that's into dudes with trucks, maybe a Confederate flag truck,
Oh, okay.
She's like a pick me kind of girl. She's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm into guns and stuff, dude. That
Tom girl grown up,
yeah, yeah,
or a tomboy
exactly.
grown up.
Yes.
Tomboy grown up.
Well, at least that's what they portray themselves at, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. They probably aren't a real tomboy, but
Right. It's like
they're co-opting the tomboy
you're
aesthetic.
you're like Alabama University kind of people,
Yeah, all right, all right, all
like those
right.
girls are into football, they wear jerseys and
Right.
stuff, right?
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
into like
yeah.
race trucks and all that. They're cool, whatever, right? But that's not me. That is not me. If you knew me back then, I'm like, ooh, no. I mean, she was, relatively attractive, but I was like, nope, not interested. So she comes up to us and she goes, "Hey, do you guys want to play pool with me and my friend?" And initially, the first thing out of my mouth was like, "No, I'm not interested." I just said, "No, no, no, thank you." Right? I was like, "No, no, no." But my friend Daryl looked at me, and you should have seen like the daggers that came out of his eyes. They're like, come on, dude. Like, let's go. Like, you promised. You promised. And I was like, okay, okay, we'll play pool. Like, I freaking hate playing pool. I hate anything like pool, golf, bowling because I hate things that like don't react back. Right. Anyways, so we go over to this pool table and her friend's there, and her friend's like this, cute redhead, and I'm like, oh, great. But she's kind of a hipster. She's got that like, she's got broho friend and like kind of a hipster, kind of like, 2000s era. This was had to be 2010. It was 2010. Like, I'm talking about a hipster, right? Like you guys remember back in the day, we're all millennials here, right?
Mm.
A little bit of emo vibes to her, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. A hipster emo girl and the broho hanging out. It's the interesting dichotomy going on here. And I'm like, I don't really want to play pool, but I'll do it anyways, just for Daryl because he's blah 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 blah. And I start playing pool, and the little hipster girl's like, oh, she makes a comment, and like right away she talks about Star Trek, right? And I'm like, whoa, time out.
Marry me, baby.
I was like, you just dropped the Star Trek reference on me, and I'm like, so you like Star Trek? And she's like, oh yeah, I love Star Trek, and and then she made some like other joke, and then we started talking about werewolves and stuff like that, and I was like, oh, okay. Anyways, I married her, right? Like I knew like that night, I was like, oh, we're gonna get married. I knew 100%, right? And I did nothing. I was just me. I was just me, my usual self, going to my through usual life, right? And what the whole point of the story is like we actually ended up getting married like right away, like she moved into my house, and I know it's not the traditional Christian way to do it, but she moved into my house like 3 weeks later, and she hasn't left. It's been 14 years
Perfect.
now, right? And
Perfect.
yeah, it just I knew that second, that instant, like the first like conversation we had, I knew like I was gonna marry her. It was just I just knew it, like I was like, yeah, you're not moving anywhere. She was actually planning on moving up to Portland, right? And her
Bad
family was
idea.
right,
Bad idea.
right. And I was like,
Ooh,
no, you're
you
not moving
saved
to.
her, man.
I was like, nope, you're not moving to Portland. You're moving in here. I just got this new apartment. You're moving here, all right? And she's like, well, I don't, you're just moving in here. You just go ahead, go bring your fish from home. Let's go. You're moving here. And then here, she's been here forever. We've lived in numerous places, and finally settled down in South Carolina. But I guess what the point is that like once you identify your core self and you find that like that purpose in life, that like that you become part of something, people become attracted to you, right? You don't have to be attractive, you don't have to be super intelligent or this Chad or all this stuff, right? You just got to be yourself. You got to be true. You got to be true to yourself and community, and people will come to you. God will provide, right? God will find the right person for you, if you have faith. All right. That's what I think is the key. And no amount of advice or anything is ever going to do that. You just have to do it, and
Yeah.
it will happen. All right. And
Managerialism has been an enormous failure. So why would we think that anything even remotely related to it, which that's all this advice giving is, here's the
right,
plan, here's the plan, here's the plan, here's the plan. No, shut the hell up.
right.
Yeah.
This is a basic human thing that all of us that all of us are capable of. You just have to go do it and figure it out and be an idiot and
Well,
have courage.
so the other part and the other very, very important part towards this, right, is that we, as in me, I and you, Uncouth, and you, Fisto, is we have to be the proper mentors, right? Because our parents, most of ours, kind of sucked, you know. Something what like
Yeah.
60% of us, our generation, grew up in split marriages. I, thank God, was fortunate that that was never something that happened to me and my family, right? We
Yeah,
were
same here.
my mother and father stayed married and loved each other until my father passed away. Uh, my wife's family, her mom and dad are also still together, and they've been together her entire life. And I think that that fact is what, the idea of divorce doesn't even exist in our, and I'm talking about we had a secular marriage up until my wife is recently becoming a member of the Orthodox Church in the last few months, as I finally returned. Um, it's even in our secular atheist lifestyle, we would never even think about divorce. It was never an option that ever crossed our lips, ever, we even talked about it as, as secular people were like, we're never going to get divorced because that's absolutely not acceptable, you know, period, unless there's like violence or, drug use or something really crazy like that, right? But no, it never even crossed their minds. And I think that that was molded to us. It was modeled to us by our parents. And so it's our goal to model a marriage and a true marriage and a true lifestyle for not only our own children, but our children's friends and the people around us. Because as adults, we don't just influence our kids, we influence their friends and the people we encounter, right? And we need to do that. We need to be able to set up as a model like for the people that are coming behind us. And if we don't do that, there's just nothing there. You know what I mean? They will leave, you
Oh,
know?
absolutely, man. Both me and my wife's parents both got divorced, and like we have to be the example for our children of that. And it leads to like hard conversations with the children with like about the parents, because some of them got remarried and like my mom never did, but like conversations about why they didn't, and none of them are Catholic, or well, most of them aren't Catholic, so it's conversations about like the religious aspects of it and everything, and like taking care of them in their old age and stuff like that. And you got to be an example of that, like taking care of them in their old age, like no matter what, too. Like, because if you want your kids to take care of you in your old age, despite any issues with like boomers you have too, like you got to take care of them too. Like, so you have to be the example of what you want your kids to be, no matter what. Like, I don't care what issues you have with your parents, you have to get over them. Like, so I don't care what my parents do. If I want my children to take care of me in my old age, and I do, because I don't believe that Social Security or anything else will be around for a retirement option, means I have to take care of my parents.
Right.
Just end of story. And I do it because I love them. Like it's a duty from God. Like end of story.
Right.
So, like, you just got to be there. You got to open your hearts to them.
right? And to go back to the house thing, right? You as a parent and as a husband have to be that rock, right? That's what we're called to do by God, basically. We have to
Hmm.
be that rock, and we have to build that house on a foundation that has strength, that has a structure. If like the boomers, if your entire like existence is, well, we're gonna live here until you go to college, and then we're gonna sell the house and buy a condo in Miami and a boat, then you've destroyed the foundation of your family, you
Hmm.
know? You've left nothing. And that's why not only do you have to build the house, you have to build the home and make sure it lasts. The home you're building right now, like if you guys are young and married and listening, the home and the family you're building right now has to be the home, the spiritual home, not only for you and your wife, not only for your children, but your children's children. And even better, your children's children's children. Okay? That's what you have to do. That's what we need to go back to. And it's not about financial issues and that kind of stuff. It's about a mindset. It's about a just unclicking and taking out all that those assumptions of the end of the 20th century and throwing that shit in the trash, okay? Because that stuff is poison. And once we get rid of that, we can go back to just realizing we're going to build something not for myself, not for me. It's not about me. It's not about It's not about Alex.
Yeah.
It's about my grandchildren that I don't know and I might not even know, you know? And
You're
Hmm.
that's
making me think of a student that's graduating this week, and she told me that she wants to work at the high school as a teacher. Like that's her long-term plan to come back to the high school and teach. And the thought of having her as a colleague, that's fucking cool, man.
where that'd be
Like,
awesome.
yeah, and it's that building for the future generations. Because she loved to have my class. She took my world history class and looks at me like I'm a goddamn wizard. And I'm like, you want to be a wizard too? Like,
Right.
so that's that, and then instilling that mindset. So then when she's my age, she has students that stick around and then become her colleagues. I mean, keep it going and
Spread
spread the
the
good stuff through time and space.
Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
I think in the next few years, I think in the next few years, man, I think what I'm gonna be kind of my focus that I'm gonna kind of be thinking about is what can I do to build my community? What can I do to create my community? What, and I think that the answer for me is very similar to probably what Uncouth is doing, which is, become a member of a church, get involved, be there. Like the greatest thing about my church, man, is I walk in on Sunday and there's kids everywhere, right? I'm talking about kids younger than my daughter, so that like 4 or 5 year olds, bunch of kids my daughter's age, like between 7 and 9, and then there's a bunch of teenagers, and they're just all friends, and they're all part of it, and they're all serious, and they're all taking it in, and I just think like these are the people that matter in this entire room, right? These are the people that matter the most, right? Like they're the key, like, so how do we make it better for them to stay here, to live here, to be part of this community, and that's something that I'm just racking my mind about it, and it's just something interesting. It's something that like I don't think our parents thought about, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that just needs to be drilled down to knowing what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do, and then thinking outside of the box. So, for instance, out where I'm at, there is basically no building code. So, what that means for us is we have a bunch of trees, a bunch of oaks, and we now have 3 or 4 lumber mills. So we can build a bunch of stuff out of logs for free and timber frame it or do traditional stud frame. And we're now deciding on a community building. And if we wanted to, we could do peer foundation and build it nearly for free. Um, or we can do slab foundation if we wanted to cough up the money for a slab. If you live in a place that has little oversight onto homeschooling, you have a lot of freedom on how you want to raise your children. You could get together with other people in your community. Again, if you live around a local community center, you can get together with other people and think about what you can teach people, like, and organize, Alex. If you put together like a church fathers, like, lessons, if you put together like traditional rhetoric lessons, arithmetic, like the traditional lessons, and you actually taught your children the classical, like, educational stuff. Like, think outside the box in terms of what you could do on that church property in terms of, I don't know its acreage, but if it's really far, like if you have enough acreage, you could build community butchering areas. There is so much up for grabs right now in terms of people's willingness to do community. Like, all these are conversations that we're having right now in our community. Everything from like education to like owned heavy equipment and butchering. Like, it's really, really an exciting time.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Right. I
I
agree with
agree.
you, man.
It's the potential to be the seeds of regeneration, which
Hmm.
is exactly what we've wanted, right? I mean, down deep in the heart of hearts, it's gosh, if I get an opportunity to actually do some good and fix it, oh, done, sold, fine.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
We do not choose the time we get to be here, Mr. Frodo, or whatever the hell Gandalf said. I
uh,
mean,
Right.
it's
Right.
essentially that. It's essentially that.
Right. No, that's great, you know. And like I said, uh, it's an ongoing project. All right. It is an ongoing project, and we don't have the answers, but we're talking about it. Right.
mhm.
Yeah.
And I think that where we're at right now, where we're standing is, I think, as an online community, because that's what we are. We are an online community. I think we need to start separating some of the insanity that's going on and ignoring it, right? We just cannot get into endless stupidities about, like Christianity versus paganism. You know, like whatever. Go do your thing, okay? This is the true way. You'll see the results. Go do your thing, but you're welcome to come when you're ready, we just have to, sternly reject, liberal nonsense, but there's no point engaging with it anymore. Like, it's been discredited. We can move on from that. It's time to start.
Beyond the occasional shut up retard.
Yeah,
That's about
exactly.
as far as you can
I
get.
think it's time to start working towards ideas, movement forward, and we need to shut down people that are naysayers or, downers and doomers and that kind of stuff, okay? Because
Yeah.
we cannot waste this energy on that anymore. It's
A lot of this stuff is very much psychologically no longer allowing people to stop you. And if people don't like what I'm doing, stop me. Like actually physically come find me and stop me because that's
right,
the only way you're going to get it done. There's literally nothing one can say or imply or no, you're just going to have to come at me.
right,
So
right.
deal with it.
All right, guys. Is there anything we're missing on our conversation tonight? Anything else you want to talk about before we call it a night, Uncouth? Or do you think we covered everything?
I don't think so.
I think we had a good conversation, man. I think it was good. A little bit on the more serious, darker side than usual, but I liked it. It's the mood I'm in right now.
It,
Yeah.
it, it was a blast, man.
Like always. you know?
And strongly encourage folks to find us. You know, you mentioned earlier that we have our Substack is where this got started. But if there's anybody out there not on Substack and you want to take the time to make an account just to tell Alex, myself, and Uncouth what morons we are, please do so. Like
Right.
the hardest part about this is that there are no shortcuts. And in my mind, one of the faults of the online advice bro vibe or whatever the hell you want to call it is it's just here's the system, go do this, it'll be great. Sorry, no, you must have the dialectic, you must have the discourse, you must talk, you must get to know each other because then you will communicate things that words are not capable of conveying. And if you want to get anything done, you have to get to that level, whether you like it or not. So jump in the pool, assholes. It's fine.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
And I'm going to tell you right now, and this is for the listeners, right? I like to talk about this stuff because it I learn from my own conversation, if that makes sense. I learned through this
Yeah.
discourse,
Yes.
talking to Uncouth and talking
Yeah.
to Fisto and talking to everybody. And what advice I give is from my own lived experience. But I will tell you that I don't have an amazing career that makes big ass money. I'm not some Andrew Tate guy. I am not a super fit bro that's got like, Baywatch stud body or whatever, I'm in pretty decent shape, but like not the best. I am not the best husband. I have tons of failures. I'm far from being the best father. Like I'm stumbling through that. I'm going in blind basically. I can only do what my own father did, which was pretty good, I think, because I turned out pretty well. But in this 21st century world, I'm learning, man. I'm learning every day as I adjust. I, you know, I fire for effect, that kind of stuff. I'm constantly adjusting and uh, changing things. And that if anybody tells you parenting advice that's very specific and stuff, they're lying because no two children are the same, and you have to take account of their personalities. And I happen to have a very headstrong daughter that I could barely get her to do anything without having a conversation with her that's like 20 minutes every time I ask her to do something. Um, I don't when it comes to spirituality, I'm far from being anything you want to emulate, right? But I try. That's all I've got. So keep that in mind, and I think that that's a good way to look for advice, because the guy that tells you he's got everything together and you should do it this way, he's full of shit. I'm sorry to say that, because nobody has everything together perfectly. Even it's not real. There is no life is a struggle, okay? Life is a journey, it's a struggle. You're constantly looking to improve yourself, and you're constantly failing and moving forward and failing, and it's just how it is, I mean, so yeah,
yeah.
you know t-
I mean, basically, you're saying you're human, Alex,
right,
and
right,
everything in this life needs to be on the human level. And I'm constantly trying to tell people this on Substack is that it like the US, and especially after the Enlightenment, like we always want to make things bigger, and all it does is it makes the problems bigger. Like we try and look for systems and perfect solutions, and all we need to do really is be human and recognize that we're human and just deal with our messed up selves and
right,
ask God for help. Like,
right. You can't do it alone. That's the key,
yeah,
man. You have to get rid of the I. Okay, you have to get rid of the I, and you have to just say, God, help me out here. Okay, like have mercy on me because I am a mess, even when I try, and that's just how it is. And until you realize that, you're just not. You're you're building a foundation of sand in that point. All right, for you guys listeners at home, this is the Black Ibis Social Club, the premier podcast off of Spotify, but you can also find us on YouTube, Apple, uh, Spotify, all the different places. Both Fisto and I have the actual written word Substacks. Fisto writes some great stuff. I write some okay stuff if you're interested in it. Um, And we have an episode every single week. We record every Wednesday, give or take a few days here and there. And I try to get them out first thing Thursday morning. And sometimes I just get really lazy and they come out Friday. Okay, but for the most part, I've always gotten that Friday. And we also, we would love your subscriptions. Fisto and I, could always use the money, right? Because it's money and we need it to survive.
Support the best looking podcast on
The
Substack.
best looking podcast. But the reason we need the money is because this stuff costs money, right? It's not free, whether it's an opportunity time or the microphones and the gear. Zoom is not free. There's a free version, but it's low quality and it only lasts an hour.
Should we run a contest that once we get a certain number of paid subs, I'll post that infrared selfie?
Oh, right. He will post the infrared selfie after that.
Infrared selfie. Yeah, it's pretty badass.
And there is, for our paid subscribers, this summer is going to be it. Okay, guys. Like, we are dropping a lot. I have a lot of plans that we're going to be starting to do. I'm going to start doing deep analysis of certain books. My first one is going to be on Mircea Eliade's The Sacred and the Profane. That's coming up once the school year ends and I can actually have time that my daughter won't be in school anymore. I'm going to do more movie reviews. I want to get Lisa in here so we can do that Total Recall thing we've been talking
Total
about
Recall
for
episode
6
this
months,
summer,
man. Yeah,
brother. Oh my god, be still my heart. Be still my heart.
We're going to do more.
Let's go.
And I guarantee this to all the listeners, okay? This is my promise, right? These weekly episodes are like talk radio, okay? That's what I'm going for here. And they're talk radio, they're community building, they're that kind of stuff. Then there always will be
We're turning the frogs gay.
They're always going to be free. But we will have more focused episodes where we're talking about a specific topic or something like that. I might be behind a paywall because we need to give something to the paid subscribers. That way they subscribe. And there's going to be tons of stuff coming out. For paid subscribers, we have a Telegram channel. All right. Shout out to our Telegram bros. Okay. If you are a paid subscriber and you're not in the Telegram channel, just do it. Just come on, join us, talk to us privately, and you find that either through the subscribing and you're going to get the email. The email has a little QVC code or whatever that's called. Is that what's a little squiggly line thing called QVC or QVC or something?
QR code.
QR code.
QR code, old man.
Leave me alone, man. Okay. So you're going to get that. There's also a locked post behind a paywall that has that post. If you haven't been on it again, so you can search the Black Ibis Substack and you'll find the page in the archives and you can click on it and it's like you can scan it with your phone or whatever cool people do now and you can end up in our Telegram channel. You can call us retarded and that all you want. But also most importantly, I want you guys to subscribe and have, comment on everything and subscribe to Uncouth, man. His Substack is fantastic. He did the whole series on slavery, not slavery as in like the transatlantic slavery, but the spiritual kind of slavery and different polities and just fascinating, interesting stuff. I want you guys to subscribe to every one of our guests, okay? Because that's how we build community, by having these conversations back and forth. We don't agree with everything our guests say half the time, right? I mean, we come from different elements in different areas, but we share a core humanity in, somewhere deep down. And I love that, and I love the community around it. So please subscribe and support all our guests by buying their books. I mean, we got Lisa and Alexander and, Konstantin von Hofmeister. That guy's building stuff. I mean, his press in Europe is amazing. We got people from all over the world coming on the Substack, on the podcast. So, we're getting close to a year and a half now, man. It's been a fantastic journey so far, and
almost a toddler, man.
Yeah, we're almost a toddler, right? So, anyways, thank you guys for listening. Uncouth, thank you for being a friend of the podcast and a guest. We're going to have you on more and more and more. Keep writing, Fisto. Keep being you. Keep calling them retarded. And I love all you guys. I love you. I love all you guys. And Christ has risen. Good night.
Good night.